Hello, everybody. My name is Randall Stewart, and today we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365, increasing efficiency, productivity, and collaboration. I'm going to go through and introduce our presenters. We have Susan Vincent, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, John Cross, who is the Database Administrator of Community Legal Aid SoCal, and Jaime Cartagena, who is the Deputy Director of Operations at Inland Counties Legal Services. I'll go through just a little brief layout of what we're going to be presenting here. We'll go through the introduction and then use cases. We're going to go through use cases from LAFLA, from Community Legal Aid, and from ICLS. We'll also talk about acquisition and implementation, and then we'll have a conclusion and time for questions. Just to tell you a little bit about why I proposed this session, a little background on what I've been doing with Microsoft. I am not coming to you today as an expert, but rather someone who's gone through a somewhat transformative year, getting into Microsoft features, trying to broaden the capabilities that we have at ICLS. For many years, I had treated LegalServer as my singular focus of development, and eventually came to a point where, as much as an administrator likes to be a sort of miracle worker, you get a request, someone wants to do something, and you want to give them that feature. You want to build it out. I came to a point where there were certain things that we just couldn't accomplish in either the forms or in the reports interface particularly. And so I started to look at other options outside of LegalServer that could easily integrate. We did SharePoint integration, which was really great, and that was kind of a jumping off point for looking into features like Power Automate and other things. To give you an example, some years ago, we decided to embark on creating our own custom time and expense reporting feature. Our accounting department did not like the timesheets module that LegalServer offers. LegalServer has a lot of great features, but they just did not take to it. And so the idea was to simply create a custom build out. Initially, this was not a horrible idea in that our staff was at a fairly small size. We had about 72 people, and the build out was manageable. This was all accomplished through branch logic. And the build-out required us to send notifications that were specific to user. If you're a LegalServer administrator, you know how difficult that is. You know what that sounds like. It would require a lot of branch logic, and it did. And over time, our organization doubled in size. So the build-out over time became less and less practical. It became more trouble than it was worth. It's a great feature on the front end. The front end user gets to review their time, their expense record. They click a button and they submit. Very little action is needed on the part of the front-end user, but the back-end user the administrator must do a lot of maintaining to keep this going. So over time I started to ask, how can I offload this effort? And the answer to that was to look at Microsoft 365. And so I was able to do that by going to trainings. Microsoft does offer their own run of trainings. I also took in a lot of office hours and trainings provided by Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project, which Susan is involved with, and that was a great resource. And so it's been a road, about a year-long journey through learning about Microsoft, learning what it offers. This would cover Power Platform tools, other things like Microsoft SharePoint, and lists. Microsoft Lists is, I feel, a really underrated feature. And so we're going to go through some of these tools and show you what we've done in a series of use cases in Microsoft. So I'll go ahead and hand this off to Susan. Here is the scepter of power.
It's like my magic screwdriver. So I wanted to go over a few use cases that we have for Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. All of these are built using Microsoft 365 tools, and I'll try to highlight the specific tools that we used. And what I want to just kind of mention about all of these is they really are in response to identified needs by the program staff. And so as we heard in the keynote this morning, anytime you have operational challenges, you have to think of people, process, and technology, all three together. And so what these tools do is really give you the technology to facilitate the process to make the people happy and enable them to do their work. So the first one that I wanted to highlight, just as kind of an example, is we created a closed case file storage app using Power Apps. And that's, again, part of the Power Platform that Microsoft offers. The problem that we were trying to address and solve was that our secretary team and our facilities team needed a workable system for storing and tracking front desk applications and closed case files. And so when folks come in, they fill out a paper application. We need to retain that for a certain period of time. Likewise, if we've got wet signatures, anything else, we need to know where that file is. We need to know where it is for the entire duration that we're storing it before our file retention policy says we can destroy it. So we built this using Power Apps on a SharePoint list, and I will agree that SharePoint lists are a great place to start. If you want to start consolidating data, start doing more stuff automatically, there's a lot built in there. You can think of it kind of like Excel, but it's a lot more than that. And so you can see here, this is just the first page of the app, and so it's very simple. I showed this to our Director of Client Services and Compliance, and I was like, do you want me to make this look more grown up in any way? And she's like, no, it's clean, it's clear, it's colorful, I love it. And so we stuck with that, and you can see the options, very simple: create a new box label, find or update the box info, archive the boxes, or identify which ones are ready for destruction. And so when you click on that create a new box label option, you'll get kind of some drop downs. Which office are you creating the label for? Is it for closed case files, or is it for those initial application files that perhaps did not result in a full representation? What year were they closed? In this case, we've selected case files, so that's relevant. And then is it a current box that you're storing things in? The presumption is yes, that's why that's the default there. Then when you click Create Label, what it's going to do is it's going to look back at that SharePoint list and say, what was the highest number that we've gotten to so far? And we'll give it the next number. And so all of the team that's using this can create these sequential numbered boxes without having to message the entire secretary team and be like, what was the most recent box number that we had? Or reference back to an Excel sheet that perhaps gets out of date or someone edits accidentally, et cetera. And so this gives, again, our frontline staff, our secretaries, the ability to do something that they need to do without having to get into the weeds of the back end or really engage with that at all. It's nice and user-friendly. And so then you can see this is if someone clicks into that second option to view or update box information. You can pick your location. You can see all of the currently open boxes that you can archive things in. Those are the green ones. And you can search as well by the box number. And again, the idea for this is that anyone who's at that office is able to go in and see this and do it. Anyone that's our secretary team, right, that's been trained on using this. And so it's not part of the Microsoft 365 process, but we also have a system in Legal Server where we document for those closed cases what box number they're in, right? And so we can go to Legal Server, look at the case, see what box number it's in, go find the box if we ever needed to. This is the cases that are ready for archiving, and so again, you can see what year they're closed. For us, cases are stored 3 years at their local community office, then they're moved to high-density storage, and so all of these are ready for archiving. And so whoever is doing that archiving can go through, mark all the boxes that they're moving, and then that button at the bottom right will actually turn green so they can click on it once they've selected boxes. You can't actually move anything if you haven't selected anything to move. And then, so that's the closed case file storage system. It's one of the more simple things that we've set up. There's not a lot of moving parts. It literally just is a SharePoint list and a Power App, but it's solving a real problem. And so I think that that's really the metric of whether something is good or not. Is it solving the problem it was designed to solve? Not is it complicated or super fancy. Another use case that we had and that we've kind of used Microsoft tools to solve is that we needed a way to notify our front desk folks of expected visitors, be that client appointments, be it board members that are coming in, vendors that needed to connect to a specific person. And so what we did is we created a Microsoft form, probably really familiar to folks if you've ever use Google Forms, basically the same thing. And this allows any of our staff to fill out this information. And the reason that this was such a big deal was that we, for a long time, had kind of one main person covering the front desk, but as we've grown, that could be any one of a number of people that's covering the front desk that day. So you can't just send an email to the assigned receptionist. They might not be the one that's there when the person comes in. And so this allows us to have everything in a centralized place. We also continued to iterate on this. So we built that out first to just have the kind of list of folks that are coming in. And then we're like, wait a minute. Now that we have this information in a centralized place, we can do more with it. We can send folks a notification of their upcoming appointment in their designated language. And so we can actually send folks text messages, emails, et cetera, with the information that's put on this form. And so the process is that folks fill out the form. That information goes onto a SharePoint list. You can view that list as a calendar. We then have a Power Automate flow that takes that information, sends the appointment information to the client if the person has indicated that is desirable, and then we'll optionally copy that email to the legal server case itself. And so you can see the form there. When I pulled up this next image, this is what it looks like on Power Automate, a very, very, very small part of the Power Automate. So you can see here if the staffer who's completing this form has selected, yes, I want this person to receive a notification, and the language they need it in is Farsi, we can then go down and say, okay, we're going to translate the date of the appointment into Farsi. You can see that that's the kind of Farsi date component there. We're taking the date that was put in on the form, putting that in the correct language. Then we're deciding, okay, what notification type did the staffer select? Was it text or email? And then that email itself is already pre-translated, right? So we know that there's human-reviewed translation of the email, the text message itself, and then we're just popping in that automatically translated date, right? So we have the benefit of the human translation to make sure that it's accurate, but then we also have the ability to have it go out automatically and not have to go to our on-call Farsi person to say, how do you write this date? And make sure that it's correct. So that's the front desk visitor notification system. What it looks like for the actual front desk staff is we've put this on our client intake SharePoint site. I haven't shown you the list of appointments. It's kind of there below because I didn't have time to fill out all sorts of fake info and didn't want to clutter it. But you can see there they've got the ability to click on the appointment for each office. That will bring up a saved view in the list of just the appointments for that office. But by default, it's showing everything for the current day. And so again, the staff or whoever's covering the desk can just go there. They've got all the resources at their fingertips, and they can see everyone that's expected for the day and who to connect them with, so that they're not, having to send lots of Teams messages or call people to try and figure out what someone is there for. One thing else that I'll mention, we do have a hybrid schedule and room reservation app. The reason that we built this in-house was because we looked at a lot of external tools for scheduling rooms, booking rooms, et cetera, and there was one key piece that they were all missing, which is that we wanted to have folks on a alternating schedule. So your schedule, the first week, you would be in the office 3 days a week and at home 2 days a week, and the next week, you'd be in the office 3 days a week, and then home 2 days a week, whatever the opposite is. And so most of the tools that we found, you could do a schedule of which days you're in the office, but it's going to be the same every week. And so we didn't have the ability to have that kind of rotating that we wanted. And so this is built on SharePoint lists. Again, this is a Power app. We did put that in Teams so that everyone in the organization automatically has it. They don't have to go find it. It's just a nice little tab there on the sidebar for them. And this allows staff also to reserve available rooms. And so if there's a day that they're not scheduled to be in the office, but they want to be or need to be, they can find any available desk, go in there, reserve it, and that's their assigned place for the day. You can also mark that you're going to be out of the office, and why, if you'd like to indicate that or not. And again, this really allows us to just make sure that we know where folks are as we continue growing our staff without growing our offices at the same speed. It allows us to make the most of that resource that we have, make sure that those rooms are being used at their full capacity. This one is a lot more complex, so I'm not going to go into all of it. I just wanted to highlight that this is something that you can do, and I know that John's going to talk a little bit about a similar tool. We use these tools for many other kind of workflow tasks. And so one example is our Stay Housed LA folks, which is our partnership for eviction defense. They'll often try and get in touch with someone and not be able to, and so we've got a nice little button in Legal Server that they can click. It will pull the person's language and then send them a text message in that language saying, hey, we tried to contact you, we were unable to, here's the number to call if you still need our help. Similarly, our self-help team, before we had kind of individual texting numbers with our phone system, wanted a way to be able to send resources to folks. And so we were able to use Power Automate to connect to Microsoft Form, to Twilio, and allow them to send out messages with referral information to those litigants. A pro of that is that they're not giving out their individual numbers to litigants to text back. And they also have a running list of everything that they've sent out. And so if the manager wants to review that, go back and make sure that they're sending out the correct information, or even do kind of analysis on the most frequent things that they're sending folks, they're able to do that. We have a facilities and supplies request. Again, you might notice a theme here, forms going into a SharePoint list. We have a language assistance request form, which takes a staffer's need for language assistance, looks at our SharePoint list of all the staffers with language skills. We'll actually put a group together of all the staffers with that language skill, and based on the staffer's preference, we'll either send an email to all those folks in a single email, or we'll create a Teams chat with all those folks to tell them what they need and perhaps get the assistance they need. And so you can see there's a lot more there. If you have other questions about these or anything else, I'm happy to talk after. But really wanted to just give you a flavor of what's possible and some of the problems that may be familiar that we were able to address using Microsoft tools.
Thank you. Okay, so at Community Legal Aid SoCal, one of the issues we've been dealing with for a few years has been how we deal with our grants, how we deal with the allocations to our staff with those grants, how we track documentation for each grant, the reporting periods and the days they're due, and then the data that we report. So make sure that we don't, that we have it next time we have to report if we need that data to make sure that if it's a new client or existing client or whatever. And we've been using Power Apps. During COVID, I had a lot of time sitting at home there, and I started digging into all these Power App, Power Automated, and Power Flows, and Power BI that we had available that I had no experience with. And I started realizing it's pretty easy. I'm a long time database guy, and I found these tools were comfortable to me and really pretty easy to use, and so I really liked it. So I got into Power BI, but to track our grants, we decided to use a Power App, and it worked really well. But it only did one thing, really. It kept track of the grants and kept track of the allocations, but we were still using all kinds of different software for tracking dates and for tracking documentation and stuff. Somebody would be using, Outlook for everything. Someone else would be using ClickUp or other things. So I happened to run across a part of Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Platform rather, called Data-Driven Apps. And data-driven apps it's a form of a Power App, but it uses what's called Dataverse, which is a higher license. You have to pay more for it. So not everyone in our organization has access to it, only certain management people. But it allows us to create create forms and ways of viewing the data using Dataverse. What Dataverse is it's a series of hundreds of tables that Microsoft has already created, from anything from users to to contracts, to anything you can think of. I think it's really sales related. But so I can take any one of their existing tables and copy it, and now I have my own version of that table with no data in it. And it's anything that it's related to is now I have that relationship to those tables, and I can create my own tables and relationships and lookups. Well, as soon as you do that, when you create the data, the tables, it automatically builds forms and what they call views for you. And so I'm going to go to the first slide here. And so this is what the program looks like. On the left, you see the Home tab at the top, and that's what we're on, is the Home tab. And then the next section is Grants, and then Contracts and Allocations, and those are just links that take you to different views or lists. And the view that we're looking at is showing 3 test grants that we have. And you could actually, if you wanted to edit that data, you could edit right there on the form. If you wanted to change the start dates, for example, you could change them right there on the form, so it's nice. Anything that you do on a Dataverse table, and that's what we're looking at, is the data is saved to the cloud, of course, but it's also stores the history of any changes you made, so there's an audit history. It tells you who made the change, when they made it, what did they change it from, and what did they change it to. So this form is just showing us the funding code, the grant number, and then the grant name and the dates. The little arrow next to the grant number, if you click on that, it will open up the children rows, which are our contracts. So for us, the way we do it is for each grant, we have multiple contracts. And for this test case, I just have one contract for each of those 2 grants you can see. Once we click into a contract, we're on a form. And so you can see the tabs across the top. There's general, and then allocation, and then reporting, and then billing, and so on. So the general tab that we're looking at is just basic information. I created this form. Well, Microsoft created the form, but I went in and modified the fields that are on it. It's just drag and drop. It's real easy to do. And there's no coding. You don't have to do anything, really. And then there's the amendment section there that is a multi-select list. You can add multiple amendments as time goes by. The second tab is allocations, and this is where we, I just clicked on it, this is where we go in and put in the allocation amount for each person. And it's hard for me to see, but I believe that for the top row there is me, and my allocation for that grant is 40%. And so every staff member that we have is in this database and their allocations to each of the grants. And I'll come back to that more in a minute. And then we have, this is where you would go in to enter one allocation for one staff member. Now I could have done it on the previous screen. All those screens are, if you want them to be, it's an option. All of those screens, you can modify the data right there very quickly. It's automatic. And again, there's an audit trail, so if you make a mistake, it's easy to find it. So you hit save, and then now here's another thing. This is on this list of staff member allocations. Sometimes, like our LSC list, will have maybe 50 people or 60 people who are allocated to that grant. And if you want to go in and start changing their allocations, it's a big list. So you can export it to Excel online, as you can see in the red section there. And it actually opens the document up in Excel, and this is it in Excel. You can make your changes. You can't work with it like you would in any in a usual Excel environment, but here you can do some things, and then you save it, and it actually imports it into your Dataverse. It takes it about a minute to do so, and it's pretty nice. So then the next tab is reporting, and here we can add multiple reporting forms. So we can go in and say, okay, we're going to add a new report, and it's going to be for quarter 4 of 2024. And then I didn't want to put it here just for sake of time, but it has a lot of information, who's involved with it, what are the dates, and those sorts of things. And we have what we call our report recipes, which is we use Copilot to record our Teams meetings, and then we store that information in there so that we can go back over and see how we were instructed to fill out the reports. And this section here is just to show you can add in an appointment, you can add in email, and different things right here front. And everything that you do, so if I'm working, in this particular case, I'm working on a particular grant, and so anything that I do here, or in any part of this, what I just showed you, is saved with this grant. So instead of having to go through all your emails and looking for something that someone sent you 6 months ago, you can probably find it here much easier. So then this worked real nice, except for, as I said earlier, our license won't allow for every staff member to be able to see this information. And we want our staff to be able to know what their allocations are for each grant and where they're at if they're going to meet their allocation or not. And so we created a flow. This particular flow goes out every night, and it looks for any changes that were made to legal server data, and it adds it into a SharePoint list, which are fantastic. And you can, every night I just delete the list, and then refresh it. And so then we have the data, and the data is available here. This is a Power App that I create. This is, like Susan was talking about, it's a Power App. It's not like the model-driven app. And this is embedded in Legal Server on the home page. And what it shows is you see the tabs across the top. There's the allocations, the hours worked, the pie charts, and then you see my name. That's a drop down, and that shows anyone who I supervise is on there, so I can easily see how my people who work for me are doing. And then all the way over it says two work days left in December, and every day it counts down. And then under the funding code, 3 funding codes, we give our funding codes colors, and so that's why they're different colors. The assignment dates, start and end, the percentage of allocation, and that comes directly from what we just looked at. And then it does a little bit of math to figure out the monthly hours that would be needed for each of those grants. And then the next one, the hours worked this month, comes from Legal Server. So they can see the next thing is how many hours are remaining this month to meet your requirements. And then that's the last column, needed per day for this month. And the colors there actually mean something. Green means you're good to go, you made it. Yellow's you're getting close, and then red, of course, you're way off. And we do it by month rather than by grant period, because you can get way behind real quick on an allocation, and then we would be telling you because we did it that way. And at one point, I was telling somebody they needed to work like 30 hours a day in order to meet so we changed that because it was depressing. And then the next tab, the hours worked tab, this doesn't show much because I don't have any test data that I wanted to put up there. But you can see in December it shows how many hours I worked on each grant, and then the percentage off to the right. And this is what supervisors use to quickly look at to see how their staff's doing. And then and I will say we do have a Power BI report that shows this data much better, much more powerful to look at, but that's only available for our supervisors, not for all staff. And it's a license issue for us. And then the pie charts is what everybody likes. The staff requested this, actually. When I took it away for a while because I didn't think anyone really cared about it, and I got a lot of complaints, so we put it back. But it's the same as everything that was on the first tab under allocations. It's just on a pie chart. And that's it.
I'll take it. Yep. Cool. Okay, that was awesome. Thank you, John and Susan. So now we're going to go through some use cases with Inland County's legal services. I'm going to display our SharePoint site. We did a support center in SharePoint. A lot of people might treat SharePoint as more like a document repository, but we decided to do something to bring all of our training materials and kind of condense them into one place. And of course, then you can bring it into Teams. I also utilize Microsoft Lists to run a support ticket system. Some people get an external service. We didn't want to do that. I wanted to build something in-house, and so I used Microsoft to do that. And then I'll go through some examples of Power Automate and how that kind of enhanced those features and how we brought it all together in Teams. I'm also going to go through some slides detailing our analytics platform, doing that in Power BI. That's a great tool, and like was said earlier, it is pretty user-friendly. You can get into some pretty complicated stuff, but it's not a horrible task to become accustomed to it because they really do make it so easy. And then, of course, we brought that into Teams as well. So the first item here is an example of our ICLS Legal Server Support Platform. So we have kind of branched out beyond Legal Server, but it is mostly Legal Server focused. This is an example of what this looks like in SharePoint. So I basically came to a point where I realized I had a lot of training material. I had recorded over about 6 years, close to 400 videos, and it's one thing if you kind of put those in a folder and you tell people, all right, that's the training folder, and you can go into this folder and find training videos, but I wanted to make it a little bit more user-friendly for our staff members, and so we do have a link to the ticketing system, our new staff onboarding resources. We have a development projects page that is Microsoft Lists, training materials, which really is done wonderful things for condensing all of those things that accumulate over time. It's really easy to just kind of have a folder and that's what you rely on, but I think this is more engaging for staff. Oh, you know what? I'll go through the quick links. Quick links was also really good. This is everything you see right here. This is not a lot of work in terms of building this out to make it appear this way. This is largely based on a template that was made available by Microsoft. That's one thing that you get, is you get a lot of templates. And so it really wasn't that difficult to put this together. And it's, in many ways, it's kind of like a portal. And so we have these quick links that kind of take you to other areas of resources like our expense report library. It links to our time and expense portal. You have Legal Server and Power DMS and a whole recording section. And so this was another thing that we developed in terms of support, and that was we used Microsoft Lists to develop a support ticket system. This has worked out really well for us. We just passed the milestone of ticket number 800. A lot of tickets that have been resolved, a lot of issues that, not necessarily technical problems, but people having questions, people needing to alter something like a time slip that has already been submitted. A lot of these things were being done in Outlook, and if you're doing them in Outlook, you know that it's very easy to lose track of a conversation. If you're doing it in Teams, you could have 100 chats that have been loaded where you've had conversations with all kinds of people about issues that come up day in and day out. We developed this new item form. This is not a custom build in Power Apps. This is the default setup. It makes it very easy to do this. We do have a project to develop a version of this form in Power Apps, but it really is just creating the columns. One of the things I like most about this is that as you're creating columns and you're placing those in your form, it's a little bit like how you would do that in Legal Server. If you're a Legal Server admin, you get a request, we need to track some information. You go in and you start establishing your lookups and your fields, and then you have your form. This was very similar in that it was very easy to create these fields for the form itself, and then those, of course, feed in as columns into the main list. Another great thing about this was that you could have an entire conversation revolving around the issue that's being raised. The comments there do not relate to the sample ticket. I didn't want to do that. But I'll show you here that this is our CFO, our grants administrator, and my assistant Darius, who's sitting right here, having a conversation about the ticket that they were dealing with. If you're doing this in Outlook, I'll give you an example. We came to a point where our CFO wanted to track about 6 months worth of conversations relating to a certain particular type of change. I ended up going in and literally forwarding all of these emails just to bring her into the conversation. If you're doing that and you have attachments, that's even more difficult, is getting all those attachments to go to that individual who wants to join the conversation. With this, everything remains in the comment section for the item. You can tag people, you can say, look, this is my little part that I have to say about this, tagging this other person so that they can weigh in. So you have everything. You can see that we have the priority that can be set by the submitting user, the issue selection. They can determine what kind of issue they want to raise. We do have a field for the legal server case ID, which is really great if you're raising issues relating to a particular case. It also allows you to attach a screenshot and an associated file. So if it's, for example, a time slip change request, we ask them to attach the export of the timekeeping log from the case. So if they want to go into a case and change past case time, they can just attach it to the ticket. Everyone who gets a notification of that ticket and joins that conversation can then access that document right there in the ticket, as opposed to going back and looking through their Outlook emails to try to find that material. So we enhance this by creating a Power Automate workflow that notifies the relevant staff members. So if we need to notify the CFO, the Deputy Director of Operations, myself or my assistant or anybody, we can do that with Power Automate. And I put in an example here of Copilot. So that's a big topic, is AI, the use of AI. I had mostly stayed within the realm of Copilot and ChatGPT. So this is a sample prompt for Copilot. And you can see that you do get some of what you ask for. I wanted to point out that there are certain things that are great about it. It's very good for laying a base. But Copilot is not going to understand the finer points of what you're trying to do. ChatGPT has come a long way in doing that, but Copilot seems to still have this limitation where it's going to understand the general idea of what you're trying to do, and it will lay a base for you. But you can see in the prompt where I'm asking for the issues description field to narrow to general legal service support, updating a user, or report assistance for a particular type of notification. It doesn't understand any of that. It's not going to find those things in that field and set them for you. And so you can see in that example in the red outline that when using Copilot, you're going to have to make additional adjustments, which you can see there. That's the manual work. But it is a good resource in terms of laying a base, but you're going to have to go in there. You're going to have to set those fields manually. I have yet to really get Copilot to do that for me. I imagine that the features will increase in capability over time. So for me, it's something that I'm probably going to stick with and try to hone those skills just the same as ChatGPT. But it sets up the base where the item is created, and then you get the step, you get the condition, and then the following step. But you don't necessarily get all of the finer parameters filled out. And this is another example. So you see in the send email that it's an invalid connection. It doesn't read the connection. I'm set up with my connection. And so one thing it will do is you can use it to point out things. You can see in the example there that it's unable to set the connection directly, It doesn't seem to be able to do that, but it does give you instructions for doing those things. Now, that's a very elementary example. That's not very advanced, but it's a good example of how you can use it, even if it can't directly do it, and you don't know how to do that thing. It can provide you with a step-by-step list to go in and accomplish that thing that you need to do to get your flow to work correctly. And so this here in the PowerPoint, I provided a Copilot rundown of some of the ways that Copilot is very useful, and I look like I missed a word in there. You can, providing a foundation for creating new flows, comprehension gaming, a deeper understanding of how your flows operate, and this is a good one. You can ask it to make suggestions for how you can improve your flow. You can take an existing flow that you might have used for a long, long time, and you can say, well, Copilot, I want you to look at this flow, and I want you to tell me what more can I do, or what could I do differently? And it will give you a rundown of suggestions. Now, that, of course, is limited to how well it understands what you're trying to accomplish. So the more, just like with ChatGPT, the more that you provide to Copilot, the more you will get out of it. And I don't know how this flow operates. This is an example of asking, please explain how the flow operates. That's another thing that you can do. I did that a lot with ChatGPT as well, is the more I got into it, the more I started to ask, don't just give me a code and say, all right, well, this is what you need. I want it to explain how these components operate, because it's very easy to get to a point where your skills in terms of applying things you're getting out of AI to greatly exceed your actual understanding of how they work. Advance. And then this is the last one, to update a flow, to make suggestions on actually adding other steps. Maybe you used a certain series of steps, and you can ask Copilot to please provide an update of these steps or different steps that you might use. And so that was one thing I got out of it after a while. I started to find that the more I used it, the more I was getting into new steps that I did not even know existed. That was a really great thing that I got out, is that I would ask it to please create some kind of base for a flow, and it would choose something that I might not necessarily have known was available in those options. So expanding your skills by interacting with it and saying, well, propose something, and then you kind of follow down that rabbit hole of learning about those other things that naturally you might not have thought to use. This is an example of what was used to set up our notifications for tickets. So we saw in the support tickets, you have the form is filled out by the staff member, but we wanted certain things. For timekeeping change requests, we wanted to be able to attach an Excel spreadsheet. Now, you can do that easily in the ticket, but conveying that via the flow into the outgoing email, that did not work out initially. You had to specify the format of the file, and so I did turn to ChatGPT to please give me some tools to make that possible, and that worked out really well. It comes to the staff member who needs to be notified, and that person can then open up that Excel spreadsheet in the email, and you have it formatted with the help of ChatGPT. There was also sometimes when I would set up one of these emails, I would not necessarily get Outlook identifying the hyperlink and making it clickable. That was another thing that I kind of had to revise, which was make the hyperlink clickable in the email. And so this is an example where you can ask ChatGPT, please craft some kind of code that I can use that will force the email to display the link as clickable. And so there's an example of what one of these support ticket notifications look like. You can see that the hyperlink is clickable, and it has the information from the created ticket. You can see that the individual who submitted, some details, the date reported, the priority, the issue, the legal server case ID, and then a brief description. So this is what we receive when one of these tickets are submitted. And this is an example of what the update time slip email looks like. So this is where I took that coding that was made available in ChatGPT, and I was able to have that file show up as an Excel document, so that when we get the Outlook email that says, okay, someone has submitted this, you can open that up and it opens up in the correct format. So this is where we kind of brought everything together in Teams. This is what the support center that we saw before in SharePoint, this is what this looks like in Teams. So unfortunately, I couldn't display the entire thing, but it's the same content. You can see that it's in the general chat for our ICLS Legal Server team. It makes it really easy for people to access. They have all those same things available to them that you would have seen in SharePoint. And so it's very easy to just go in there, go into Teams. A lot of our staff, they do a lot of work in Teams. It's kind of has a, it's great for coordinating, but Teams also has a great social media, almost like social media capacity. And so people are very engaged in Teams all the time. So I wanted to bring everything into Teams as much as I can. You can see that there's a tab for Support Center. There's a tab for the tickets that is under our group support. It actually appears in 2 different places. And so you can get that group support channel to display the ticketing. If a person has submitted, they can always go back and look at what they've submitted. And then we also brought in our training materials. That was another thing that we established in SharePoint and brought into Teams so that people would have all of that material in one place. Next thing is our analytics platform. And I want to say something about data connectivity. That is one of the best things I found. It wasn't just building out dashboards and reports in Power BI. It was also the fact that you have all these options for data connectivity. I thought that was really great. And the thing I use the most, of course, as a Legal Server administrator is the API option in Legal Server Reports. That's a really great resource because it's free. I have been told not to build out too large of a set because a person can get throttled in terms of them lowering your capacity or bandwidth. But I haven't run into that problem. I've been able to link up Legal Server Reports, quite a few of them, well over a dozen Legal Server Reports that run on various reports and dashboards. In this case, you can see that you have the Get Data option that allows you to bring in that API address and that authorization key. And then lastly, that is an example of what was built out in Power BI Desktop. This is a dashboard that tracks our progress through our 4-day workweek pilot program. We wanted to be able to compare the previous year with the current year. So this is something that we built out to kind of accommodate for that. We are bringing in information from Legal Server Reports via the API, and of course we have all these visuals that can give you an idea of comparatively how did we do this year working in a 4-day work week format rather than the previous year, which was your standard 5-day work week. So we took this sample, I think shortly before, about 2 weeks before the end of December. So over time, the gap narrowed. It was a great way to look at what was coming in as far as intakes, rejects, case. We also have another, I didn't put it into the PowerPoint, but we had another dashboard that tracked time. So we were able to look at how much leave time is now overtaking case time, and how can we look at those two things and figure out what are people spending their time on during a 4-day work week. And it did change dramatically. The number of cases opened and closed changed dramatically, and so we can kind of get an idea of what is going on comparatively. And we also added our open case information. That was actually added later. We had a space here that was mostly full of slicers, filters, and we ended up actually adding this kind of towards the end as we wanted to know what is going on with our currently open cases. So you can, here you can see how many of those cases were open prior to the sample period. Our sample period running from September through December. And so we could look at the bar there displays how many of those cases were open prior to the period, because we want to know what is the caseload like during this testing period for the 4-day work week. How many of those are active open that you see right there. That is the percentage of cases that are actually open during that testing period. So it was a great way to look at what was going on currently and what was going on comparatively. This is another thing that I got a lot of great use out of in terms of Power BI Desktop, was the creation of custom columns. In Legal Server, you kind of have what they give you. They do have a formula fields feature that they are currently, I believe it's still in beta testing. That's a great thing, but if you want to take several columns and reduce it to a single result, this is a great way to do that, is you just simply set up a custom column. And I have in there an example of a ChatGPT prompt that delivers this coding that you can use, the DAX code that you can use to create this new column. It's, in a sense, it's kind of like creating a new field that just sort of reduces the results from other fields so that you can find out something more directly. This is another example. So these two kind of work together, the two examples, which was last time slip date and time activity within periods. So you could tell, did this case have activity based on the last time slip during a specified period? So this was accomplished using custom columns. In Legal Server, you do have the number of days. If I go back, you can actually see that, the number of days since the most recent time slip. So I use that as the indicator for last time slip date. I would just kind of include the day total and determine the date, and then use that to establish whether the case had activity within that period. So this is something that you might not necessarily be able to do directly in Legal Server. To do it in Excel is possible, but if you're not a person who does a lot of formula building in Excel, it might be challenging. This was a lot easier. And then lastly, this is an example of establishing a measure for the top performer based on total cases. This is something where we wanted to look at the case assignment and who had the top numbers. We kind of built a sort of leaderboard based on this that determines who the top people are in terms of case numbers. And that was really easy to do with measures. And then at the bottom, you can see the example prompt, which is to create a measure to find the top performer based on the count of cases handled. And so that was, I don't want to say it's easy, because I did go through probably about 6 months of refining my process of writing prompts. In the very beginning, I did get quite a few hallucinations. It would simply hallucinate whole features, or it would direct you to use something that didn't exactly match its description, but it had the general idea. It took quite a while to kind of refine it, where it would tell the difference between whether you wanted a distinct or unique count versus a sum. For this, actually, no, sorry, not for this one, but for another one, I wanted it to produce a month number. I don't want the month number to be handled as a sum. I want it to be handled like text, and that's the finer stuff that sometimes you have to get into or tweak yourself that ChatGPT is not necessarily going to know. It's not going to understand that while you have a numerical field, you might not necessarily be wanting to produce a sum based on that numerical field. So there was a bit of refinement over time to get ChatGPT to understand what it is I was trying to do. And I would go so far as to write, I am an information technology officer at a legal aid organization. This is what we are trying to do. And you want to give it that context, because otherwise it doesn't necessarily understand ultimately what you're trying to accomplish. If you give it that information, over time it will start applying that every time you write in a prompt and say, this is what I'm trying to do, please give me something that's going to be relevant for my work. I can say within maybe the past 6 months, I've had maybe 2 or 3 actual hallucinations. It was very common in the beginning of that process. But over time, I was able to kind of refine how I approach my prompts. Yesterday during the AI Summit meeting, someone had drawn the comparison of naive prompts versus much more robust prompts. And so that was something that did develop over time. And so the last thing here is bringing it all together in teams. That was another great thing, is that ultimately, once you've built these things, you can then bring those things together in teams. This is available only to our managers. I think, John, you had said something similar, is that it is a licensing issue. And so this is something that only managers are able to look at. And so they can go to teams and then look at these statistics and judge, how am I doing in this measured period? And that is it. So off to Jaime.
So we only have a few minutes left, so I'm just going to try my best to summarize what we have in the next couple of slides. So these are key considerations for acquisition. So everybody has access to the slides in the app, so I'm not going to go through them directly, but I'm going to get to the point that I wanted to make for implementation of any particular app through Microsoft Teams is the formation of a technology committee. So one thing I did want to ask right now, how many organizations here do have a tech committee that they use in order to help them? So that's great. It looks like most of the people here are part of that. That is a key instrumental piece to this whole puzzle, because as long as you make them as these teams having key members of your staff. So it's important to have various members from your intake specialist to managers to be a part of this team in order to really discuss what the needs of the organization are. And that's what my role as a Deputy Director of Operations is to find out what the needs of the organization are. And that way I can go, and then Randall, who is on our technology team, is there to be able to listen and see what Microsoft can potentially do through all of these apps. So that's the key that I think is in all of this, because we can talk about implementation, we can have discussions, we can talk about how we're going to roll out this technology efficiently and so that it makes sense for the staff. Because I know that a lot of people here probably have rushed through certain technology implementations because of the pandemic. So I'm guessing that a lot of people here, raise your hands, when the pandemic started, all of a sudden we're like, oh crap, we need to use Microsoft Teams in order to stay connected with each other. We're going to roll it out quickly. How many people did that? I know that that happened at Inland County's Legal Services. So sometimes we're not going to have the luxury to be able to have a proper rollout, but that is something that needs to be discussed. Who's going to be involved in a pilot stage? So that's one thing that we always want to try to do, is we get a core number of people involved in a pilot stage so that Randall can test out a few things here and there. For example, we have been trying in our legal server to integrate into our Outlook so that we can get LFR notifications. So whenever somebody has a litigation fund request, so that we can have the proper channels and make sure that it gets to everybody. A nice message is sent out over Outlook so that we can know that the litigation fund request from legal server has been inputted. We can track it. We can do what we need to do. So as long as we are able to have testing, to have a proper rollout, because we don't want to have a situation where we implement a new technology and nobody knows how to use it and it goes left unused. Then that can lead into training. So training becomes an important piece of implementation as well. So we want to make sure that we have everybody involved that we need to. One of the things that we like to have is creating flowcharts that visualize the implementation of a project from inception, key players, testing, and rollout. That helps us envision what the project is going to be and what the end result is. You can have these lofty ideas, but if you don't have the end result in mind and test it out and planned out like this, you're not going to be able to achieve the goal that you want at the end of the day. Plan for contingencies, including potential delays and scope of adjustment. So we actually right now have been trying to implement a new procurement software, and that has been very difficult because there have been a number of delays because we just need everything to be perfect before we roll it out to staff. So just expect delays. Don't announce something is going to be available before you're actually ready to roll it out to the entire staff. So we just have under 2 minutes left. We didn't get to all the slides, unfortunately, for this, the building and testing, but I did want to have a few minutes left for any questions that anybody may have as to what potential Microsoft has to building out these new and interesting developments. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Do we have someone with a mic?
There we go.
So, I know that custom solutions can be really impactful for my staff, but the tragedy of custom solutions is if the person who developed them leaves, do they basically die with the person who created them, or can somebody step in and and take them over, figure them out, and then make changes to them over time. So do you, in your opinion, honest opinion, do you think that these Microsoft tools are self-explanatory enough that if any of you were to leave, then somebody could step in and maintain these solutions?
So I can answer briefly. Self-explanatory, no. But one thing that I try to do as I'm able is to bring someone else along to kind of shadow. And so I'll build it out, get it to a stable place, and like, hey, here's how this works. Can you go in and make this update or this tweak and kind of let someone get under the hood, if you will, while I'm still around to make sure it works. I will say also, and this is not directly answering your question, but I forgot that I built some of these. I forgot that the case file storage app existed, and it had been running for 2 years without me having to touch it. And so, so far, and I'm surprised actually, Microsoft hasn't deprecated anything that like actively broke these. The other good thing is that these are very common tools in enterprise, and so there's a lot of resources to learn how to use this for free. There are outside folks outside of legal aid who have this knowledge and can come in and help if it's ever needed.
There's some questions on that. Let me get to that.
Sorry, they're under approved. I had the tab open, the wrong tab. Yeah, okay, so build versus buy, I think we already talked about a little bit. Any other comments on kind of the decision to build or buy? To make it internally versus finding something off the shelf?
Well, I enjoy building, so I usually go with that. I like it's a good way of developing skills. If you just buy it off the shelf, I mean, that's easy. You can take something, and if it's adequate, if it's something that has great reviews and people like it, that's an easy way to go. But if you choose to build it, you're going to learn a lot, and you have more control over how it actually interacts maybe with your case management system. So I would say I like custom build-outs.
I would say I hired an assistant 6 months ago. She works part-time. She works for me every day, though, and she can do almost everything that I can do. And that is pretty easy. She's smart, but still, it doesn't take that much to.
Yeah, for that
Figure it
question,
all out.
I would echo that. Having a capable assistant is a good idea, somebody who can shadow that person who's been doing that development for years. You want to be able to have that person right there so that if that person moves on, the developer moves on, you can have another person. I would say with Microsoft, in conjunction with Copilot and ChatGPT, it is within the realm of being able to figure those things out. It might take a while, and they might have to get accustomed to the way a person was building, the choices that they were making, but yes.
I mean, I have to do that with my own apps. I'm like, what was I doing when I built this? There's another question about who is typically responsible for developing Power Apps or using Power Automate. Is it a specialized team or role, or is it part of someone else's day-to-day job?
I can tell you, we had all of a sudden one day I looked and there was like 20 flows that had been built over the past few months, and I didn't have any idea who did it. And it turned out it was one of our attorneys just started, decided, yeah, that looks like it might work. And she wrote for referring cases to different units within our organization. And she had no programming experience.
Yeah, I will say, just as a kind of hot tip, as you start doing more of this organization-wide, create a service account. So it's an account in Microsoft that is not for a specific person. Have everything stored there. Especially with Power Automate, you can share ownership, so you can have a team working on something, but it's in one place. And so if the person that built it leaves, you still know where it is. I think the last questions were about Copilot, but I know that we're at times. If anyone has to leave, then please do. There's also the evaluation in the app itself, so please fill that out. Did you want to say anything else about Copilot? Have any of you used Copilot beyond kind of the designing phase?
Beyond the designing phase?
Yeah.
You mean in terms
Like
of
rolling it out to staff?
Oh, no. I think we're in the process of doing that. We just drew up an AI policy And we've looked at that somewhat. I don't know how many people are actually using it or using it effectively. Jaime might be able to add a little bit to that.
Yeah, no, we haven't officially adopted Copilot as one of the platforms that we're looking at. There's obviously a lot of different AI platforms, and there's a lot of neat presentations that have been done as to the efficient use of different AI models, but we haven't specifically adopted Copilot yet.
I will shout out the SharePoint Affinity group tomorrow night if any of you are interested, tomorrow afternoon. And with that, I think we're done.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.